Hello, welcome to the May 17th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de, or you could simply enter questions in the chat field and we'll go through the questions chronologically. If you do not see kind of an immediate response to your question, realize that my ability to answer the questions in real time will soon be eclipsed, and we'll try to catch up, but we'll go through all of the questions chronologically in the chat. And when asking questions, if you don't see an immediate response, if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. And when you ask questions, if you could perhaps specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which operating system and which version number, such as 11, 12, or 13. And also, we should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for particular topics from previous live streams, there's over 33,000 different topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators. So Agent K and Jazz Dude. So we'll give a special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better user experience for people. And we'll give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful resource of information to the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question from Ivan. Hi, Greg, Cubase 13. After exporting audio, the pool window audio tempo shows wrong BPM. Can Cubase automatically detect the right tempo? All right, so it could depend on a couple things. One, if there's tempo changes in the project, but let's go ahead and say we have a project that's at 123 beats per minute here. So we'll listen to it. All right, so let's say we wanted to export this and our tempo is at 120 beats per minute. And if we go to our pool window, we can see that all the original files here have a tempo of 120 beats a minute. And our project tempo is at 123. So I'm going to select these particular events and let's do an export audio mix down. So we'll come over to our export audio mix down. And as we do this, I'm going to make sure that we insert the tempo definition of the file right here. So we're going to check that. Let's go ahead and do just a quick audio export of our stereo, and I'm going to put it into, we're going to create an audio track. And as we come here, we'll see our new audio file called May 17th, 2024. Let's open up the pool window, Control or Command plus P. When we see our audio file, the tempo is automatically stamped based on the project tempo. So make sure that as you're doing this, that when you go to your export audio mix down, that you have the insert tempo definition checked, and then the tempo should be correct right there. Okay, so we see from Ivan, second question, regarding a global search function. Is there any global search in Cubase 13 instead of deep diving in submenus? The function I need every time I look in YouTube, laughing out loud, thanks. So there isn't like a global search function, but if you want it to, go to your Cubase help, and this could take you directly to the document. So let's say we go to our Cubase 13 manual, and then if I wanted to come here and say, okay, let's go for logic input transformer, I'll just hit Command or Control F, and then we'll just search for input transformer. And then we could go directly to that particular function right here. And so, you know, the PDF version is probably a bit more detailed than the web help version, but you could always kind of search, as long as you're connected to the internet, directly right from within the help menu of Cubase. Okay, another question. Is there an easy way of bunch export user track pictures, icons, and customize them in folders to have separate instrument sections for better workflow? So there isn't a specific function of exporting a number of files, but when we go to add track pictures and we go to the user, you know, at this point we would import from a particular folder. So, you know, the folders that you work with and that, you know, your pictures are in, I would have those organized before you import them into the project. And then that way all the track pictures will automatically be organized for you, but there's no way of taking these files and exporting it with the track pictures. So it's not the highest priority for that. So sorry about that, but so maybe have the pictures organized, you know, as you're importing them or taking pictures that you want to work with, and then that folder structure will automatically be carried over. Okay, MID asks, when I play my track, I want to put a certain marker on the timeline, for example, verse 1, then chorus, etc. How to do that? So we have marker tracks, which are really good for this. So if we want to add a track, we could add a marker track. And we'll come here, let's add our marker track. So let's say we come here, I'm going to hold down my, so we'll kind of switch to our pencil tool. And then we could put markers in just by clicking. And if we wanted to hold down a shift key, we could label these. So we'll say, okay, click here. Let me just clear my throat. So we click here, we'll say verse 1. And we get to this point. And again, hold down the shift key. We could say chorus 1. And we could also define cycle markers if we hold down shift plus, I think it's control or command. So as soon as we try to remember the keyboard shortcut for, so if we hold down control or command plus alt and drag, we could also create cycle markers. And if we do that while holding down the shift key, we can now drag across and create cycle markers. And a position marker is just kind of the start, and a cycle marker can be for like the entire length of a course. So we have a beginning and an ending part. Now, another method that people could use for this is to use an arranger track. And sometimes people prefer this visually because it could be a little larger. And we could say, okay, I want this to be, and we would hold down the Alt or Option key and say, okay, this would be verse 1. And we could call this chorus. So as we come here, we can say, okay, this will be chorus, Alt or Option, double click. So you could clearly kind of see the arrangement laid out for you like so. So either markers, and you could have position or cycle markers, and the difference being a cycle marker has a beginning and an end. The position marker just has a beginning. Or utilizing the arranger track, which will allow you to kind of do non-linear arrangements. You could label those verse, chorus, etc. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Great to see Matt Elston saying hi to the amazing Cubase family. We have Suede TV and Recording Studio. Says, hi Greg, thanks in advance. Okay, so Patrick asks, hi Greg, how am I able to disable auto fades on specific tracks. So if we want auto fades to turn off, we would just see this icon. So if we have this turned on, we could just see, okay, now we have our fades. If I wanted to disable that, I would just come right over here, and then we could choose to click on this icon, and then we could enable, disable different fades for the auto fades, like so. All right, and Patrick also asked, were you able to figure out how to apply select length of fade using a keystroke? Not an effective one. So, you know, I could do some stuff but I'm not sure if you want it to be the same exact length for a fade in or fade out as well. Because, you know, we could come over here and just do, like, you know, move the cursor ahead, and when we hit A, we could, you know, just do like, you know, like fades to range if you wanted to just kind of select, you know, a range like that. But I'm not sure if you need a different length of time, or if it's, you know, always 50 milliseconds or something like that. All right, great to see Dean Garvey Jazz checking in from California. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. All right, so we see a question from Cycling is Awesome. Hi, Greg. How can I copy samples from the MediaBay in a separate folder? So usually MediaBay is going to reflect where the samples are. So if I come over here, we could see, let's come over here and let's go to this computer to documents, let's say for the files I just recorded. Okay, and I want to go to projects. And we will choose Hangouts. Done a lot of Hangouts here. All right. Okay, so let's say we do May 17th, 2024. Okay, so let's say we have this. So, you know, I think that MediaBay is really kind of designed to reflect what you want to do. But let's say if I want to drag this into this folder, it'll ask you, do you want to copy this file into the new folder? So we'll say copy. And now when we come over here, we could just see the particular folders. So really all you have to do is take this, and I'll put it into the mixdown folder. We'll say copy. And now as we come over here, we'll just rescan. We could see our May 17th, 2024. So, you know, so you could kind of copy and move the content to different folders, but it makes sense to kind of leave it in its original location, because that's what the project is always going to be referring to. But you can just copy it and place it into new folders just directly into MediaBay. All right, Chiluminate asks, says, hi Greg, using a MIDI controller, how do I assign one key / pad to play a chord file? So probably the easiest way is, you know, usually, you know, Cubase is going to accept whatever MIDI input is coming in. So if you're playing a single note, it will play back a single note. But if you want it to play back a chord, I will come over and let's load up an instrument track. just all right, so I'll just get to our project here quickly. Sorry about that. So what you can have is your one MIDI note trigger a chord pad. So let's take a look, and we'll have chord pads. All right, so I'm going to come right over here, and we'll see our chord pads in the project here. I'm going to activate. So now I'm playing one single MIDI note. We could play multiple chords simultaneously, but this way, one incoming MIDI note. I turn it on, and now we go through the chord pads. So using the chord pads, you could take one single MIDI note and have these automatically kind of mapped to the particular chords. And then one MIDI note can trigger very complex chords if needed. All right, so we see from Patrick, it says, "Hi Greg, I get the effects channel count is at limit error when adding a send effect to my orchestral template. I'm using Vienna Ensemble Pro multi-outputs from rack instruments, yet I can't add a single effects track." So Evan, I think if you're, I'm not sure, let's see how many effects channel tracks we can add. We'll do a new project. It might be like 256. So I'm not sure if you're utilizing groups in some way, but let's come over here. So it looks like we could have 100 effects tracks. So just out of curiosity, on your template, Patrick, let me know if you are, just delete one of the tracks here. If you do it without using, I don't have a Vienna Ensemble Pro instance or license, so I'm not that familiar with it. But maybe it's somehow like the interaction between the two of them. But if you try running without the Vienna Ensemble Pro within the project and see if you run into the same instance without incorporating the Vienna Ensemble Pro, and I know Jazz Dude has that, so it looks like 64 effects tracks in the project here. And let me just go ahead and remove that, and let's see if we could add 2 more effects tracks. But if you don't have any, I'm not sure why you would be getting that particular message. But let me know if you try without having the Vienna Ensemble Pro, just everything, if you just do what I just did, if you run into the same message, or maybe there's a way that you're routing the audio to Vienna Ensemble Pro that's causing the limitation. All right, so we have Steve Thompson checking in from Glenville, New York. Thanks for joining us. Always great to see Razel from Denmark. All right, great to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Very loyal attendee. I think you may have been on the very first live stream we ever did. Appreciate you being on, Robbie. All right, so we have a question from Ecstasy Tunes. Hi, Greg. Some of my plugins are missing in Cubase 13, but I could use those plugins in Cubase 11. Why is it not showing up in Cubase 13? I tried to manually add the directory, not resolved. So I'm not sure if you're running on Mac or PC. If you're running on Mac, it could be that, you know, Cubase 11 wasn't optimized for the Apple Silicon and would run all VST2 plugins. And if you run Rosetta mode, if you run native on Mac OS, you know, and if you have it, you know, Cubase running as native, your VST2 plugins won't work. So you need to have VST3 versions. Most of the companies have updated to VST3 versions, even if you have VST2. So if you're running Mac OS, that could, you know, that could be what's causing it. If you're on Windows, make sure that those plugins aren't 32-bit as well. If you had like a bridging solution, I think it was Cubase 8.5 when we went 64-bit only. But, you know, check those things out. And if you could let us know which operating system you're on, that would be helpful as well. All right, so we see the artist known as Love saying, hello, everyone. Thank you for everything, Greg. So you're welcome. Thanks for being online. All right, so we see from, I think it's Danielle, it says, hi, Greg, driving home from work. Can't wait to join the stream. Drive safely. Okay. All right, Chiluminate asks, hi, Greg, the tempo map has various values. How to find the average value? Okay, so let's say we have a tempo track here. So there's not like a specific average value, but we'll show you a way to kind of average it out a bit. All right, so let's say we have this as our tempo map. So if I select the particular events and we go to the right center edge, we could kind of average out. So we could have kind of the extreme amount, or we could just come over here and basically kind of compress the changes to give you kind of the average amount, just like so. So again, just select the tempo nodes here, go to the right center edge, and then you could just hold the left mouse button and move the cursor downward, and then you could kind of average out the values. But it's not going to do like kind of a exact, it's not intended to do a mathematical average between two values, but you can kind of get to the same finish point in the long run. Okay, so we have a question. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Yash, just to make sure I didn't miss any. All right. Is there a way to move multiple MIDI/audio tracks on different tracks to one selected track? There's a setting in the edit menu, but only move one file at a time. Yeah, so it seems like it's only going to be kind of the one file that I've kind of come across. So if we come here, let's say I want to move these to, I'll add an audio track here. So now you know, there's this function of an edit menu. You could say move to events to selected track. But again, as you notice, it seems like it only moves one event at a time. So I'll just try it again here. Oh, looks like it just did multiple files. So I'm not sure. So if we come here, let's select all these. I want to move it to this selected track, and I'll try an event over here as well. So we'll see what this does if we have different tracks. So it looks like, you know, all the tracks are on that one particular track were moved, and this looks like it's slightly different. So let's take these. We'll have this track selected, and I'm going to activate the project. That could help. So it does look like it kind of keeps the proportionality if you're doing it on different tracks, but all the events on the same track can go down. And there is kind of a, if you nudge up or down command, you could also do that. So if we come over to the key commands, there is a function called nudge up. And I'll set this up into my MIDI remote here so we can see it. So let's get to MIDI remote. Let's go to my Chord Nano control. I'll switch this to untitled. And I want this button to nudge up. And this button to nudge down. So I know this is probably a bit of a workaround, but so now I get to take this selected event and just move it on different tracks like so, just using nudge commands as another option. Okay, so we see from Stevu, is there a way to add cover art to the song? So not within Cubase, but if we go into Wavelab, so we'll come over here to Wavelab, we'll show you where we can do that. So once we come over, let's say we have this and we go to the metadata in Wavelab and we say edit and we go to like your, if we come here to your ID3/iTunes, you can put lyrics in as well as picture, but it's not a native function of Cubase. So kind of for delivery and for mastering, that's often when that's going to be applied. So that's why it's kind of a Wavelab function and not a Cubase function. So again, inside of Wavelab, you could just take the song and go to the metadata to edit, and then you could come over here to the ID3 iTunes and then just add a picture and put that with the file. All right, so we see it says, "Hi Greg, I'm a little confused about the purpose/function of the Add Event button, which pops up in the top left of some ARA windows like Melodyne. Please cover." And it says, "P.S. Did you catch my email?" So I'll respond to your email, but one of the things that I would suggest for the person if they wanted to do a video is perhaps use the trial version and send us a copy of the video. That's generally how we would handle situations like that. But let's take a look at the add command. So let's say if I'm here on this particular track and we go, I have my track selected and we go to, let's say, our spectral layers. Okay, so now when we double click, so I think if we go to add event, that as soon as we select another event in the timeline, that those events are immediately added into the ARA extension. So if we wanted to remove that particular event, we could do that as well. But this way, if we click add event, all of the events on the track will be added to the ARA extension. All right, so Patrick asks, is it possible to have the send effects enabled instead of disabled by default? All right, so let's take a look. I want to, let me revert this quickly. I think that, so we come here, let's add an effects track to the selected channel. So add the reverence. Okay, so now when we come here and we see that descends is automatically added when we added the effect track from the track, we can see that that is automatically. Let's see if there's any preferences for that. You could also make sure that you have this preference checked of Connect Sends automatically for each newly created channel. So if you go to preferences to VST, make sure that you have that. But I think with that any time that I would go to add a track, that add an effects channel to the track, that it was automatically turned on for me. All right, great to see Stefan from Sweden. Thanks for being such a loyal attendee. All right, Gary Barry asks, why does my Cubase have a glitch when I have the internet on? So it could be that oftentimes if you're doing Wi-Fi or network connections, that could interrupt the audio performance. And so often if you're on Windows platform, one of the things you could do is check out, there's a utility by Resplendence Systems, and called Latency Mon. So LATNCY, Latency MON, Latency Mon. And what that will do is it could do an analysis of your system, but realize that sometimes video cards can interrupt the audio performance. Wi-Fi cards and network cards are also notorious for interrupting the performance. So sometimes those things will just interrupt the real-time audio performance and say, hey, I need to do something in the background. So with the Latency Mon can help you to determine if that's what's going on, and maybe updating your driver or using a wired connection versus Wi-Fi can make a difference. But it's probably your network driver that's interfering with real-time audio performance. Okay, so we see from Yash decides, is there a function to delete excess MIDI information and CC data that falls outside of regions? I think we covered this last time, but let's go ahead. So let's say we have our data here, and I'll just write in some CC data. Okay, so we have that going on, and let's say we shorten the event here to 2 bars. All right, so I think we made a macro last time. So let's come over here to our key commands. And I think it was like orphaned notes. Let me just... Okay. Let me just find a macro here. Okay, so I think we did this in conjunction with a logical editor preset. I may not have saved a macro. All right, so I think we did it as a delete notes beyond cursor. All right, so I'm going to open up the logical editor preset. See if this is... All right, so I'm going to change this to insert. I'll say type is equal to MIDI CC. Okay, so we're going to save this as a preset. Okay, and let's add that into the macro. Open up my key commands again. Okay, so we're going to add this command. So now if we come over, so we have these events that are kind of outside, and if I done this right, let's run the macro. That now it's going to delete those notes. So what we did is I selected this particular event. We move the transport to the next event, which moves it to the end. And at that point, we could just come over here, and even if we wanted to, so as we take this, you could just have that kind of move and delete those particular events beyond a cursor. Let me just check this. Yeah. So as soon as we do this, we could just say delete. So once you have that, if you move the cursor to the end, you could just make the project logical editor just do that. So let's say we have our CC data here. So we come here, we trim the event. Then if you move the cursor to the end of that event, we would just say apply. And then the notes and the CC that are outside or beyond the cursor length will automatically be deleted. So try that project, or try that MIDI logical editor preset for that. And you could incorporate it in a macro if needed. All right, so see Patrick just saying, I'd like to have a preset with a select length of fade that I can apply selectively instead of using the auto fades. All right, so let's say if you don't want to use the auto fades, we'll come here. So let's say if we double click, if we choose the apply length here in the files, so let's say I want this to be, exactly 1 beat. That, you could just choose the apply length right there. So if we want, and then you could save that as a preset. So we can say 1 second fade out. And let's come over here. Let's do, so we'll say we want 1 beat again, 0.0, 0.0, save a preset. And I'm going to apply the length. So now we could just come over and, adjust the length just like that. So let me know if that makes sense. And let's see if we could pull up the presets from a key command. Yeah, so let me know if that would work for you, where you could just, when you just double click, just click apply the length. And if you have that, let's see, that may be, let's come over and see if we do this. If I just open this up and we apply the fade, so let's come over here. Apply standard fade in. So I'll take this file again. I'm going to assign that to my MIDI remote. All right, so So let's see if I have this set. All right, so I'm going to set this as default right here. So now when I do that, I could just have a standard 1-beat fade in, like so. And if I want it, so once we are in the fade editor, just come here, you could set the length, do the apply length, and save that as the default. So let me know if that would work for you, Patrick. All right, we see Jay from Secret Studios says, Greg, I'm having trouble removing a long guitar squeak from a strum. Would you be so kind as to cover a few strategies which you may employ with Cubase and spectral layers? Okay, so let's come over. I think I may have. Let me see if I can find a audio file. I may have a guitar squeak. Okay, so let's take a listen. Let me try the AIF file of it. Okay, so, sometimes you have to work with a lot of patience with this, but let's go ahead and come over here. So we'll select a track. Let's go to spectral layers here. Okay, so we can see probably right here we have a number of the squeaks. So I'm going to try selecting kind of magic wand selector. So that's kind of like more of an extreme amount, but so just kind of using like the magic wand function here. So go to your composite view. So saying, okay, I want to take this, and we could come over and we could cut. So, so try that using the magic wand tool, and then often you can kind of just see them visually and give that a shot. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're well. All right, so Patrick Emanuel A., wonderful to see you on. Hi, Greg. Happy to be on live on MediaEditor. What's the difference between all parts, active parts, all parts on active track? Okay, so we'll show you real quickly rather. Okay, so let's take a look. So we have kind of our orchestral. All right, so we go to, let's say, our full screen editor. Okay, so right now we could see, we'll come over here so we can see our part. So as we come over here, we can see, okay, we can see all of the parts. And let's go ahead and we'll show other parts that we want to see as well. Okay, so let's say we want to see our flute and cello. Okay, so we could have one as the active track. So we'll come over here and we'll say, okay, we want to see all the parts. Now we could see the active part only. So this would kind of switch. So where this line is. So if we say, okay, now I want this active part here. So we say, okay, now we're going to see the active track. So we see our flute. And this is what's highlighted. But let's come over and when we say, let's do all the parts on the active track, we could choose our active track here. So like as we want to select different parts, let me just, so if we select kind of our parts here, we can make those active, but this would allow us to kind of pick and choose to say, okay, we want bassoon and French horn. So this way we could just select the particular parts, and then if we want to see all of the parts on the active track, or we could just see the active part, where that's the only thing that we're seeing is when we do this, or let's come over and say I want to see all parts. And as we select, we'll come here, color this, we could see all of the parts. And if we had multiple events selected, this way we could choose to take all the parts on the active track so that as soon as we go there, those particular events are visible. All right, so Daniel Bader asks, hi, Daniel here from Tokyo. I have many outboard gear here working with the patch bay. If I assign all external effects using the available I/O, I won't be able to use the inputs to record the session. So, if we, the intention of, if you have everything that's kind of, if you have everything that's set up for, having your inputs assigned to multiple devices could be problematic. And the intention, the original intention of the external effects when we incorporate them is that if we did a rendering and we rendered in place using an external effect, that if we undid it, that connection to the external effect is still there. As soon as we would undo the rendering, that the sound would be the same. So you have to be a little bit flexible. Sorry, just turn my phone down. In realizing that, with external effects, that those will probably be fixed. I know that you may have a patch bay to, have flexible routing, but if a lot of times when we're working with computers, we would expect the intention here is to have the same sounds when you undid something as when, as to what it was in the state before. So at that point, that's why those inputs can be kind of fixed. So, you may have to have, people that tend to use a lot of external processing gear will just have dedicated inputs and outputs for them. I know Michael Wagner at one point, just had a separate, 32 channels of in and out on a MIDI card just for his outboard processing gear, and that would never change. So it's not kind of like a software patch bay, but realizing that as we do this, it's a bit different because we have to calculate all the latency differences between, whether the external effect is in or not. So to have that be consistent so that your tracks aren't playing out of phase is why those inputs will be fairly fixed. Okay, so it says to illuminate, hi Greg, I just got Backbone. Can you give a quick overview? So I'm not a total Backbone expert, but we'll take a look at it. So it's a wonderful, some people think it was a drum synthesizer, but you could do so much more as like a sound design tool. So let's add an instrument track. And we'll start with different presets. So a lot of people use it for different kicks and impacts. So you could just kind of drag and drop your samples in. If we wanted to resynthesize, we could come over here and choose, different resynthesis. We could decompose. So we could have kind of our sample, and we can see, okay, I want to do my pitch envelopes. So if we want to adjust your pitch as well as different filter envelopes, you can play like the amplifier section. So once you kind of come over here, we could take each of the different samples and kind of layer it together. Some other cool things that you could do. And Robert Dudzik did some wonderful presets for this, where a lot of times you could have, different, like the whoosh sounds if you want to listen to. So you could have like all these different sound design elements layered together. And then even when you wanted to come over here, you could actually, come up with like AI functionality to generate different kick drums. That's really interesting as well. So while a lot of people think of it as primarily kind of being more of a drum synthesizer, it's really a very effective sound design tool as well. So as soon as you want it to come over here, let's take a look at. So you could just, have different impacts like that. So again, once you kind of come over and have a lot of flexibility with your control for different envelopes. You could do that. So a lot of people use it for drum synthesis, but it's a wonderful just creative sound design tool as well. All right, so Patrick Emanuel A asks, what's the best way to learn about waves like sine, saw, sawtooth for creating new kinds of sound? Does Cubase have any tools to see what kind of wave or modulation is happening? All right, so you could use supervision kind of for that. So let's say, okay, let's remove this. And let's open up. Let's do a Retrologue. Okay. So we could choose your different waveforms here. And as we want to look at those, we'll come over to supervision and let's look at an oscilloscope. And let's adjust our time on this. Okay. So now we have that, we can see, okay, and we adjust our waveform here. So you can get kind of a visual idea. So let's adjust our waveform here. So that's how you can get a sense of kind of what's going on with the synthesis. And if you want to adjust the tuning, so as we change octaves, it's going to be, we go an octave up, it's double the frequency. So, you know, use the supervision and use the oscilloscope meter, and then you can get a real good sense of what, kind of what's going on with your particular different types of waveforms. All right, so we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. Yeah, if you wanted, I see from a comment from Patrick, so Emanuel A says, can you create any sound you imagine? You know, so a wonderful instrument to kind of work with is Retrologue for this. So let's say, okay, you want a basic sawtooth bass wave. And then if we wanted to add a different oscillator, and so we could make this into a multi-oscillator, and I want this to be an octave up, and we could adjust so, you know, and once, you know, so definitely kind of play around with, you know, the presets in Retrologue, and this will give you just like a wonderful, so let's say we get a brass, is going to be so it's really going to be just 3 oscillators. So we have this sound, okay. So we have these probably slightly detuned. But again, if we wanted to come over here and let's put like a sub oscillator on, and you can put in a noise generator. So at this point, you could really just kind of, you know, get a sense of what each of the oscillators do and what filters will do, what your resonance, if you want to have your envelope, slowly evolve over time, or if you want the envelope to be much faster. And when I released a key, you could, so, you know, play around with Retrologue and just kind of, you know, get a sense of what makes those particular, you know, go through different presets. Like, so if we want to go to, so let's say we want to go to like even the analog strings here, all MIDI strings. You know, that's just going to be, and we see that that's going to be 2 octaves down. So, you know, it's a great way to learn about synthesis right there. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios asks, Greg, is it possible for more than one chord pad to be active simultaneously or for different instruments? So I think you have one chord pad. So I guess we could just go back to this project. Let's activate the project. Okay, so let's come over here to our chord pads, turn on. So here I could play multiple chords if I wanted to have like maybe a block chord of D minor and A minor together. So we could have those different chords blended. So if you wanted to have very complex chords, we could do stuff like that, as well as I could play a chord, and each of the notes within a chord can trigger a chord. So you can have kind of polyphonic chords or stacked chords, just like that. But it's one, so you're not going to get different chord pads for different instrument tracks. But again, you could have up to 64 different chord pads that could be used across different tracks if you wanted to. All right, so we have Kevin checking in from Daha Qatar. Thanks for joining us. And we have 4i20 checking in from Brazil. Great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so Ismail Bay asks, hi Greg, does Cubase 13 play sound fonts? So not natively, but if you have an instance of Halion 7 can import sound fonts. So you could just, when we go to the browser over here, and you know, you could import your sound fonts into Halion 7. So, but not natively into Cubase, but a Halion 7 instrument, I'm about 99% sure will import your sound fonts for you. And we see just Tim K just mentioning that, you know, sometimes looking for beginner tutorials on earlier versions of Cubase could be a little confusing. But yeah, let me know if there's anything, and ask any questions here of stuff you want to do. And if, some of the windows may be different over the years, but a lot of the core functionality would be the same. So wonderful to see Gareth on. I should hopefully have the bass parts done this weekend. Sorry about that. It's just been kind of slammed with work stuff last couple weeks. All right, so we see question, I have an acoustic live drums recorded. How can I change my kick or snare to the kick from Groove Agent with the same position? Thanks. All right, so let's show you that. Okay, so I want to take my kick drum and do quick sample replacement with it. So I'm going to load up a copy of Groove Agent. Okay, and let's open it, make sure that... Okay, so we want to use this kick in Groove Agent. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this track selected. I'm going to go into my drum recording. Let's double click. So let's say as we're... All right, so I see my drum track here. I want to go to... Double click, and we're going to go to hit points. And what I want to do is we'll just kind of zoom in here on the waveform, and I just want to make sure that we have the threshold set so that we're not getting like snare bleed through. And I'll just kind of adjust the intensity. And now we'll see this little create tab. So I have this MIDI track selected. I'm going to create MIDI notes. And we're going to put on C1, and I'm going to select, put on the first tracks, and let's retain the dynamic velocity. All right, so now we will come over here. I'm going to mute the kick drums. And now the kick is coming through Groove Agent here. So that's automatically just kind of placed the kicks. So if we want to listen to the kicks, the original kicks. And if we want to go to the mixer, make it louder. Or we could select all the notes here and increase the velocity to get a little more punch out of it. All right, so now let's listen to that in context again. So we'll have everything play. So now we're just hearing the kick in Groove Agent. And we've replaced the kick drum samples, which are now all muted. And we could have the sample kind of augment the original recordings as well. So once again, just go into the part, go into the hit point editor, find kind of the threshold and the intensity. You'll see the little create sub tab here, and then choose to create MIDI notes. It'll ask you where you want to place it. You want to create a new track. You want fixed velocities, the dynamic velocity of the original, and then you could choose the MIDI note, and at that point it will just create that MIDI track for you. All right, you see Roland stuff from Sussex in the UK, saying hi to me and everyone on the live stream. All right, so we see Rick Ballantyne says, hi Greg, he's rendering, so picking up tricks from the guru. I think Rick's a guru myself, but. Okay, Gareth wants everyone to select the like button. You see a nice comment from Tim K. He says he's astounded every session here with the capabilities, even if most are way beyond my pay grade yet. So. All right, so we see from Patrick, just says, hi Greg, is it possible to merge two tracks together when importing from a different project? I have MIDI information on my violin track in both projects. Both were made using the same template. All right, so let's give it a shot. All right, so let's say we have okay, so let's say we have our Iconica sketch here, and so I'm not sure, Patrick, if you wanted to merge them at the same time or at different times, but you know, so I'm going to come over here. Let's import tracks from project, and let me just go to my projects folder. Okay, so let's say I want to go to my Brandenburg Concerto. So I want to take violin 1. So when we import this, okay, so we have the option of doing a new track. And if it's using the same name, so let me import from a different project that has the same name as this, or the same track name. So if you're using your template, we'll try to mimic that. So choose a different. Okay, so let me come over to Schubert. I think we'll have a. Okay, so I'm going to take this. All right, so we're going to have kind of the same name conventions here, just like you're working with this. And I think that we'll have an option. I thought there was a way. So let's say we're going to take the parts. Okay, so when we see import events and parts, we could add the events and parts or create a new track version. So if I choose to add events and parts, and we do this, now my violin 1 will kind of be added on top, or we could again choose to, so we say we choose our violin 1, let's create a new track version. So we'll come here, All right, so we see that these two parts were added here. But we could also, if I just select this, I'll say let's import it to Violin 1 Iconica Sketch. So instead of doing a new track, and let's see if we could do new track version. So now that we've done that, we could put it as a new track version. So this way, if it's carrying over the same name, we could have different track versions, or we could, depending, so these two will work kind of in concert with each other. So when you come here, you could put it onto the same track. You could choose to add events and parts. So let's add events and parts to Violin 1. And I think what that's going to do is add it over top. So it looks like it adds it to, let me make sure I didn't make a mistake. Sorry about this. All right, so I'm going to say Violin 1. Let's put it onto the Iconica Sketch, and I want to add events and parts. Hit OK. And now we could see that this part was added onto the same track. So as we come over here, I move this. This was the part that we just imported, or we could choose to add it as a track version, either way. So, but make sure that you select the destination track, otherwise it will put it onto new tracks like I did erroneously. Wonderful Z Jazzy Lamel. Gareth says Cubase is officially the most feature-packed DAW available. Nothing compares. All right, we see Jazz Dude kind enough to post a latency mon link. All right, so we see can vary audio tune vocals based on 432 hertz. So what you can do if you want it to have a project work at 432K is so we'll come over here. Let's say we have these vocals. So if we take the vocals here, and I think we would just do a fine tune down -8. That now when we do Vari Audio editing, that as we make everything snap exactly to scale, it's going to play back. It's going to do our playback at 432 hertz as opposed to 440. So try just selecting the events, doing the fine tune down -8 cents, which would go from 440 to 432, and then you could do all your Vari Audio tuning here. And while you're tuning at 440, it's going to play back at -8, so it'll be 432. All right, so we see Patrick just says the send effects don't get turned on automatically when sending from an existing track. All right, so we'll just do new project here. Okay, so we'll add an audio track. I will add an effects channel to that particular track. Okay, so we're here and we go to our send effect. Okay, let me just make sure. Do this one more time, make sure I did it right. Okay, we're going to add effects channel to the selected channel. Okay, let me just check that preference. Okay, so now we see our effects send, but I think that if you added a different audio track, that the send is in place, but I don't think it would make much sense to have the send automatically turned on for the track, because I don't think I would want that in a mix scenario. I think I would want the effect send off. Just adding a track you shouldn't assume that you would automatically add the effect send on that track. I think that would be, very problematic for workflows. So if you wanted to, we came here, we added the track, and we could see that that's automatically connected, but I think that adding another audio track should not automatically turn on all the effect sends for the newly created track, because you may not want any effects on it. And given, so I think the assumption is correct that the effect send should be routed if you have that preference set. But I don't think, I think it's a bad idea, to automatically turn on the effect sends for newly created audio tracks. That would cause a lot more problems and confusion overall. But let me know if other people think I'm wrong on that. Okay. All right, so we see Oliver Hawkins says, I've been trying to create electronic dance music in Cubase, but it's been too difficult and too long. So let me know exactly kind of, what you're working with. But, obviously we have lots of people doing EDM stuff in Cubase. I was just helping Zed's team this week. He's obviously been pretty successful. He's just wrapping up a new album project. Okay, so we see from Home Studio World, says, many thanks, Greg. I noticed a delay when chords follow chord track, especially when quantizing chords located in a chord track appears to appear, a track delay appears on responding during follow process. So let me know if it's like if it's, with MIDI or audio that you're running into, because with audio, it's not really going to do for the full chords, but let's add a chord track here. Okay, I'll just drop some chords in here quickly. Okay, so we have our chords laid out for us here. I'm going to create just a new version. So let's look at our chords, and I'll just open up the editor here, and let's Okay, so now I want to do like a new version of chords. Okay, so we're going to tell this particular track to follow the chord track, and we're going to say let's follow the chords, and we'll say follow directly, we'll say okay, and now, I mean, that seemed pretty responsive to me, so let me know if that's what you're doing, home studio world. All right, so we see question from Patrick. Is it possible to show the amount of tracks currently selected? I don't think so, but let's take a look. Let's come over here. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to give you a number like we have 4 tracks selected or 16 tracks selected. But let me know if you need a specific count of tracks selected for a particular reason. All right. So we see from Apostolos Gonidis, I love Logical Editor, so it's great. All right, so we see Patrick says, I know the instance count of plugins in the plugin manager. Is it possible to figure out what track a certain plugin is on? I can't manually find some of them for the life of me. Okay, so let's say if we have on this, we'll come here, let me just. So I'm not sure if there's a plugin search. We'll see if maybe we can come up with something in the Project Logical Editor. Okay. All right, so let's say we want to maybe select a plugin. Let's see, I don't think it'll do it, but we'll try. Okay, so let's come over here. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to. I think if we had an effects channel track that we could do it. So let me see if we add an effects channel track. So I think we could maybe do it for an effects channel. So there we can select an effect channel by name, but not necessarily a plugin. Let me just let's see if we remove this. Okay, so let's say our curve EQ is on insert, so we're going to say select something with name of curve. Yeah, so I don't think we will select the particular track, but if it's an effects channel track, you could find it. But you might just have to manually just kind of look through inserts and find the plugins that you instantiate it. All right, Secret Studios asked Greg, sorry to monopolize. Nope, you could ask as many questions as you want. But would you be so kind as to demonstrate gating reverb effects with Cubase? All right, so when kind of gated reverbs were very popular, was to get kind of a big, huge impact, but not have the decay of reverb. So let's come over and let me just find like a kick sample. We just look inside of okay, so let's take this kick and let's apply kind of a gated effect on it. So I'm going to take these two beats. And I just want to duplicate that. All right. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so you know, one way of doing kind of like a gated reverb is just to say, okay, we'll do it as an insert here, and we'll say, okay, let's go to Revelation. Okay, so we have. All right, so one way of doing this is to have kind of a, you know, a big reverb, but very short time. So instead of having that decay, but if we wanted to do this manually, what you could do is on that effects channel track. So we'll say, okay, let's come over here to, if we put this on an effects channel track as opposed to, or I could just, we'll leave it there, and let's put a gate plugin on. And if we're doing this on an effects channel, we would just put the gate after. So let's say we want to make this like a super long haul. So now if we take the gate off, and let me just make. So that's our reverb. We could just say. So when the reverb gets to a certain threshold, we would just apply a gate so that the time doesn't go on forever. So that way we get kind of the impact, the large impact sound, and then the reverb kind of cuts off, so you get this kind of explosion type of impact with drum sounds without the decay just kind of going on forever, kind of muddying up the mix. All right, Rick Ballantyne asks, Greg, could you walk me through making a preset in Logical Editor, how to freeze all tracks in a score to free up resources? Okay, so you don't need a Logical Editor for it. I think in 11 or 11.1, this feature was added. So let's jump back to Schubert piece. And I have extra tracks here, so I'm just going to revert to my original. All right, so since I think it was 11.1, we had the ability to freeze multiple tracks. So if I come, we could just select all of the tracks, and if you go to project, you'll see, I think it's under project. Okay, under edit menu, you could just say freeze selected tracks with current settings, and just kind of, now all of the tracks that are selected will automatically be frozen. So I'll do kind of one track at a time. And then those instruments will be unloaded and the tracks will play back as kind of rendered audio files. So if you have a large number of tracks in your project that you need to kind of free up the real-time resources, just select all of the different tracks, and at that point go to your edit menu and you'll see freeze, unfreeze, and since 11.1 you could do multiple tracks at once. Previous versions, it was all going to be it would be one track at a time or one instrument at a time, but now you could just select multiple tracks and freeze the selected tracks. So I'll just go ahead and abort for time efficiency's sake. So give that a try, Rick, and you don't even have to make a Project Logical Editor preset. All right, so we have Eves checking in from Tremblant, Canada. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so Nick Saya, great to see you on, says, hi Greg, is there a way to have a command to add certain VST instruments to a session? I mean, have a button to insert Hallion or Omnisphere, etc. So we could add a key command to like insert a track preset, but not a specific track preset by name. So there isn't a hit a button, load this plugin type function that I've found yet. I'll continue to pass it along as a feature request, but currently I don't think that there is a way other than just doing track presets or dragging and dropping from track presets. So even if we had your media and you go to VST instruments, you say, okay, I want a pad shop, you just could drag it over, but it's not like hit a button and add a specific instrument, but you can drag and drop very easily. All right, so we see Robert Ladd, MediaBay preview loops at halftime. So, when we go to MediaBay, you could choose to have it automatically if let's say our project is at, 120 beats a minute. And we come over here, we can say, okay, let's go and we want to listen to different beats. At this point, It's if we click here, we could have this automatically sync to the project tempo, but there isn't. If you're looking for like sync at halftime, sync at double time, or preview at half or double time, that function isn't available. But if you change the tempo, so let's say temporarily we're at 120 for our project. Let me just, so we're at 120, and let's say we go to turn our tempo off and we have that set for 60. Now I could listen to it at half tempo. When I turn on my tempo track, and now when I click, it's going to play at half tempo. So, but, you know, maybe in the future there will be, I know people have asked for a double time, half time preview for loops. So maybe we'll see that in the future. Okay, Robert Ladd asked, does Cubase have a strum function? So there's a couple ways of doing it. So if we want to come over here, let's all right, so let's say if we have this, activate this project. So I'm just going to go to my all right, so I'm going to create chord events, or sorry, we'll go to our project, chord track to chords to MIDI. All right, so if we wanted to, we could, so when we have chords that are kind of laid out for us like this, if we grab the trim tool, if you want to do like a quick strum, if you hold down Alt or Option, you could do kind of staggered settings, just kind of like that. So if you wanted to have kind of rolled chords, you have options to do stuff like that. So now as we listen to it, and you could set different amounts. So, you know, check out the trim tool and hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could just kind of trim notes and kind of add different strumming type flavors with it. Okay, so we see from Home Studio World, it says, thank you, Greg. Is there a direct way to obtain saved patterns in Chord Pad as a MIDI other than recording the process to show patterns? Yeah, so I think you would have to, you know, so once we have the particulars, so we'll come over here to our chord pads. All right, so we'll jump back over here to this event, and we'll turn our chord pads on. And I'm going to put on our patterns and say we want it to be more piano. All right, let's try just. All right, so once we have that, to get that pattern, you know, really, you know, we could just record that. And then all the data would be there that you could copy. So it doesn't necessarily work where once we have the chord pads here that if we drag it out, it's not going to create the arpeggio. So I'm not sure if it's kind of a you know, intellectual property type of issue, but you'd have to record it into the project to be able to access and manipulate the different arpeggios and patterns. All right, Gareth wants everyone to hit the like button so that I get tickled. So it's a rumor that Gareth wasn't supposed to spread. All right, Gareth asks, I have a project where the events have been combined into parts. How do I explode the events out of being a part? Okay, so let's take, I have all these vocal files here, so we have separate events. So if I come over here and do something super clever, like glue my events, we've now created a part. And a part, we could think of it as a collection of events. So if I want to take my part and turn it back into this separate events, all we would have to do is go to the audio menu and choose dissolve part. So once we do that, now all of our parts that we're making up that kind of single, all the events that we're making a single part, were now broken down into their independent events again. So once again, if you want to take your part and turn it into events, go to your project menu or audio menu rather, I'm sorry, and choose to dissolve part. We'll give you that feature free for attending today. All right, so Gareth also asked kind of related question. All right, and what are some uses of combining events into parts? So instead of having to move all of these events together as a single entity, if they're glued for kind of organization's sake, that we can come over here and now we could go into the part editor, and the part editor a lot of people, will come over here and do editing and do comping in the part editor, because it's kind of like a really large, and this was before Cubase 6 or 6.5 added a lot of the comping functionality. So if you wanted to come over here and have kind of a larger comping scenario, you could do that, but also just kind of, I want to keep, these particular events together as a single entity. That's when I could now move, like I created a very complex, like, maybe like an EDM thing, like, and that was something I spent a lot of time crafting and creating so that the timing is perfect, and I don't want any of those particular events to ever move in time in relation to each other. Instead of rendering a file, you could create a part and move the part. And a lot of times I get this question when I select and I don't have my handles for doing fade ins, fade outs, or adjusting my clip gain. So at this point, we could come over here, and when we double click, those event handles for volume and clip gain are now just entirely inside of the part editor, as opposed to on the events themselves, on the part themselves. So again, just to get rid of that, just go to your audio menu and dissolve parts, or we could say conversely events to part. So let me know if that makes sense, Gareth. All right, we see people are missing Michael Teens' ice cream. All right, so we have Hamo 1974, just checking in from, I think it's Finland, but it's written as Fineland. All right, so we see, it says, I had to park illegally not to miss too much of the stream. Appreciate the shout outs, made my drive. We're glad you can make it. That's dedication. That's great. All right, so we see Eve says, I'm looking for Backbone in my Cubase 13 and I can't find it. I might have missed something. So Backbone is a plugin that is a paid purchase. It's not part of Cubase 13. All right, so we see Michael Teams later on. Wonderful to see you back. We've missed you. All right, now my chat field jumped. So let me see if I get. So wonderful to see Michael Teams back. All right. Let me find my spot where I was and clear my throat. Okay, so, all right, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, we see, wonderful to see David M. checking in from Liverpool. And we have Zai Fernando checking in from Norway. He says, thanks, Greg, always learning so much here. Thanks for joining us again. All right, always great to see Pertti Kominen checking in from Finland. We have our strong Finnish contingent today. All right, so we see David M. just says, Greg, thanks for the help last week with the EQ match. Would never have sorted that out. I'm glad it was helpful for you. All right, and we see Jazz Dude just says, maybe Greg could show the separate tracks in Groove Agent. All right, let me show that real quick. Let me clear my throat. All right. So one of the great things you could do if we have like multiple tracks, so let's say if I'm in Groove Agent here and we have a pattern and we have multiple notes in our pattern here. So we'll listen to this. So if I wanted to take each one of the different tracks and split it into its own track, what we could do is I'm going to select the event. Let's go to MIDI and we'll see dissolve part. And we're going to choose to separate pitches. And once we do that, I'm going to say process. And now we can see that we're going to say separate pitches, kick, hi-hat tip close, snare, fill, pedal hi-hat, hi-hat tip open. So each one of the different elements was automatically now broken down into the individual tracks for you. Okay. All right, you see Gareth is going to feed his daughter. All right. All right, so we see Patrick Manuel A says, Greg, with the MIDI logical editor, can I extract all root notes of the following chords to selected tracks? I don't think it's going to be to the selected track, but let's take a look at it. Just okay, so I'm just going to drag, just select this. Okay, so what we can do is, so say we have our chords here. Okay, so what we can do is probably copy that and paste it to particular tracks. So let's give that a shot. So let's come over here to our MIDI menu, to Logical Editor, and copy. Type is equal to note. And we want to say the context variable is equal to note number and chord, so we'll say 0. So I'll come over here, let's copy that. And let's come over here, I'm going to select all right, so it's kind of placed it into its own, and let's see if I all right, so I just see the yeah, so I don't think it's going to copy it to particular tracks, but we could just come over here, copy, and let's see if we have, I don't think you may have to, so you could kind of place it on, you could paste it onto different tracks, but maybe not multiply. So, but we could copy the data, copy it to a separate track, but not to selected tracks. All right, so we see a question from Ankaprof. It says, been using Connect Audio 2/4 interface for a while until I reinstalled Windows OS, and now it freezes the PC, forcing me to use it only on 256 hertz sample rate, which results in a cracking sound. Why? All right, so it's probably maybe a buffer size of 256 samples, but probably not sample rate. So make sure that you don't have any other programs like the Windows operating system using the driver, like for outputting system sounds. If so that could be a conflict. You could also come over here to your studio setup and make sure that when we do select the audio system, so go to studio menu, to studio setup, select the audio system, and then click release driver when the application is in the background. And then when you go to a web browser, you could do that, but also realize that sometimes if the audio interface is switching sample rates, sometimes it doesn't work. That could cause issues if the driver isn't set up to go back and forth between different sample rates as well. So, and it could be like if you just reinstalled Windows, it could be, maybe it doesn't like the Windows version that you're on. I think that's maybe probably an older interface. But make sure that if you're using it for for Windows sounds as well as for your DAW that uses two different driver architectures, that it's not switching back and forth between different sample rates as well. All right, wonderful to see Vishnu from India joining us. Glad you can make it today. Wonderful to see you back on. All right, we see Michael Teams. I see at 2:34 his triumphant return. So you've been missed, and so wonderful to have you back, Michael. Hope you're well. All right, so Tim Weinheimer just mentioning the current Steinberg Pro audio sale. So if you want to get spectral layers, or if you wanted to also jump onto Nuendo's on promotion and some other offers, check that out. So for everyone who's mad that Nuendo wasn't on promotion when Cubase was, now Nuendo is on promotion. Okay, so we see from Mr. Greg G, orchestral composer, it says me with the same question again, but the other time you didn't export and import the folder into track archive. All right, so it says, so there's a bug in Cubase 12 where you couldn't recall expression maps in specific situation. Is it still there in 13? Repro is to create MIDI tracks with expression maps and put them inside a folder. All right, so let me do that. I'll try the repro that as you describe. Okay, so we'll say clarinet. And we will import the key switches. Okay, let's come here. We'll choose cello. And let's import the key switches. Okay, so we added 2 tracks and put them inside of a folder. Okay, it says export everything to 2 tracks and a folder as a track archive. A new project, import 2 tracks and a folder. Very important not to forget the folder in C12. The expression map wouldn't load. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's select these 3. I'm going to export the selected tracks. Okay, so we'll call this May 17th. Okay, let's do a new I'm going to close this project. And let's do a new project. We're going to import our track archive. Go to our desktop. May 17th. Import the folder with the tracks. It doesn't look like the expression map is there. So I'll pass that along I'll make a note of that and pass along to the tech, to the support guys with that and do a report. But let me know if I did it correctly that time. But let's see if we just do the 2 files themselves. So let's go to import a track archive. I'm not going to do the folder this time, and we'll see if it makes a difference. Yeah, it doesn't look like that's going. So I'll make a report of that. Thanks for letting us know. And sorry for misunderstanding previously. All right, so we see Pablo, the Hot Mess drummer's on the tour bus and says hola to everyone. Let's see, Jazz Dude just says Phil Collins, who's probably well known for his gated reverb on his drum machine, on his drum sounds. Yeah, I've never worked with Phil Collins. He's been a long time Cubase user for years, but for a while he was giving a bunch of people my number to help them out. And so it was like, oh, Phil Collins told me to call you. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never met Phil or talked to him. All right, so we see, is it possible to have fader on clips like Logic Pro? So I don't, if it's going to be on, for clip gain volume, you may not see the fader on it. Let me just check. So I'm not sure if do you need a fader just to kind of grab the clip volume? Let me just see if there's any modifier keys that. But if you're looking for clip gain, if you want a fader for this, I don't think that there is a fader for that, but let me know if you really need one. I think it's pretty easy just to do that, or just to adjust the volume right here with your mouse scroll wheel. So, because we had the fader for the actual track and not the clip gain, but you could very easily just kind of do that. All right, wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, Spittoon Dude asks, in Score Editor, how do you show the key signature? All right, so let's say we have data here. Let me just put in some. All right, so let's look at this in our score editor. So really, a lot of times in a score editor, what you have to do is we'll come over here to page mode. Let's zoom out. So if we just go to the settings here, so you'll often see this line, or if you go to the scores menu to settings, and then we go to the main area. So if we come here, we could just put in your key signature right there. So it's to say, okay, we're going to put this in the key of G. And now we could just kind of come over here. So whatever key you want it to be in. So you would go up for sharps. So if you wanted to do that, or if you want it to be key of F, whatever, you can just come over here and be able to adjust accordingly. So just adjust right here. And there's probably also, if we come to say our symbols, that if you go to the keys here, you could say, okay, I'm in, C major, and you could just kind of drop in your key right here. So now we're in C sharp major. So you could put it in from the staff settings or from the keys in the symbols right there. Okay, reading through comments. All right. Okay, so we see from Jazzy Lamel says, "Hey Greg, can you explain what the X chuck does?" So I'm not sure if I know what the X chuck is. Let me know what part of the program the X chuck that you're, where it is, and I'll try to figure it out for you. But if it's like a MIDI thing, or if it's in an instrument or a plug-in, if you give me a little more information, I'll try to figure it out. See, Michael Teams just turned on his air conditioner yesterday in Texas. All right, so we see, hi Greg, can you show how to use the direct outputs and record those channels to a group track? Cheers. So generally, we don't record anything into a group track. All right, but let's take a look at it. I'll just do new project here. All right, so let's say we have our drums here. Okay, so I'm going to add, here, I'll just get that synced with my transport here. All right. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple of group channels. All right, so I'm going to add a group channel to this. So I'm going to say, okay, we're going to add a group channel to the selected channel. So now our drums are going out of the group, like so. I'm going to add two more group channels. All right, and these aren't going to be tied to the tracks. So now we could say, okay, we have our group channel, our source is going into the group. Now, if we go to our mixer page here, we'll say, okay, let's go to our direct routing. And I'm going to say, okay, let's route this to, when I select this, we're going to route it also to group 2. Oh, I added not two group channels. Let me just added 2 audio tracks. So let me add 2 group channels here, sorry. Okay, so on this track, we have it going to group 1. And if I wanted to send it to group 2, let's say for parallel processing, I could come right over here and send it to group 2 and but we may not hear it until we go into the mixer and activate it's going to be direct routing summing mode on. So now that is routed, I could route this channel to this, and then we could have this going on as well. So let's say on group 2, I wanted to do more parallel processing. So we'll come over here to our dynamics. So on this one, I have it kind of squashed, and we'll go to our mix console. So this is our super squashed. This is our particular file here. Now, again, a group channel is just processing the sound in real time. It doesn't contain any media or an audio file. So if I wanted to combine this particular track, let's say if I drag the pattern out, so we'll just come over here. I'm going to take this pattern and drag it to the Groove Agent track. So we have media here. All right, so we're going to take this. I think I messed that up. All right, so. All right. So now if we do if I wanted to take the result of those groups, what we could do, since it's going to two different groups, we could route these groups if we wanted to. So let's say I want to send this to group 3 and to group 3. Okay, so we'll set it to the same value here. So I'm going to turn it on, and let's choose 0, 0. Okay, and I want to create an audio track. And for its input, I want it to be group 3. All right, so right now, when we play, we'll see the audio that is playing, our original source. And we want, so that audio is going into group 1. It's also going parallel through the direct outputs into group 2. So we see group 1, group 2. Group 1 and group 2 are being sent to group 3. And now we could say the output of group 3, we're going to record here. So we say drum groups. So this is our input is group 3. So now I'm just going to come over here, hit record. And now the whole processing chain of the summation of 3 different groups together, we can just come over here and see as our captured audio file. So let me know if that makes sense. So again, the groups are just kind of passing the audio through for routing and processing purposes, but it doesn't contain an audio file. But if you wanted to get that same result, just place an audio track and use a group as the input source. So let me know if that is helpful for you, Tony. All right, so we have a question from Hamo1974. Is Groove Agent 6 coming soon? So I'm sure that there's teams working on it as we speak. There's always teams constantly working on new versions and new things. So, but nothing has been announced yet. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. All right, I'm finding my spot here where we were. Okay. All right, so we see from Milos Stoshik, hello, after installing the 5.6 update to VST Connect Pro, we get the message, no license found. We haven't received or a redeem voucher in the voucher section either. We're running Cubase 13 Pro. So let me know if you purchased, because Cubase, VST Connect Pro is sold separately. With Cubase, you get VST Connect SE. So that's what's included with Cubase. But if you just downloaded VST Connect Pro, then you would need the license for that. That's not part of the program. That's sold separately. Let me just see what the latest version number is on that. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. So, but make sure that I don't know if you have the particular, so you generally don't need a voucher for that. I think, 5.5 would allow you to do, the Steinberg licensing. So, but let me know if you've actually purchased that particular program, or if it's just something perhaps you downloaded from the Steinberg Download Assistant. All right, so we see Michael Teams says, glad to be back, everybody. Got my stitches out of my thumb yesterday, so the guitars better watch out today. So we hope you're doing well. You were definitely missed. Everyone was like, where's the ice cream? Where's the ice cream? So. All right, so we see from Secret Studios, says, not sure if the question got lost after screen jumped, re-asking just in case. I made a mistake earlier. I meant to ask if multiple chord tracks nor pads are possible for different instruments. Okay, so with chord tracks, sorry if I misunderstood. So we'll add a chord track. So what you could do is, let's just add 2 instrument tracks here. Okay, so with the chord track can work with track versions. So let's say I come here and we choose, so we can have one active chord track at a time. So let's say I take this and we go to our project menu to chord track, we'll say chords to MIDI. All right, and now I want to transpose this up. Now I could do, if we wanted to, we could just say, okay, so we have that in the key of D. I could say, let's duplicate or make a new track version. So if I wanted this to work in the key of C, at this point, I could select this, go to my project, chord track, and say chords to MIDI, and have different data based on C, and you could go back and forth. So while there could be one active chord track at a time, you can have multiple versions of the same chord track using track versions. So let me know if that's helpful at all. All right, we see Randy Lee on from Texas. He was happy to see Michael Teams back on. All right, Abi Adfree asks, is Cubase better than Logic Pro X? Yes. So I think what you'll see is Cubase definitely kind of, even if you look back from 30 years ago and you look at, I think you'll notice that Steinberg has the ideas that are kind of copied and implemented in other programs, but Steinberg always has the ideas initially and offers that functionality to users, and then other companies often kind of copy those particular functions and offer them to their users with often fewer features and not as deep integration because they're in kind of reaction mode. But yeah, Cubase is better, and you can run on Mac or PC, your personal preference. All right, so we see from Daniel, it says, I'm trying to get my layout the same as yours. I managed to do almost anything. What is the far left thing channel? Is it a mixer? Mostly you have the mixer in the bottom. So on this, what we did in Cubase 13 was the ability to have all of the audio channels. And to turn that on, you could just come here in the upper right-hand corner. Sorry about that. Let me just... So, and we click on this icon. So we used to be like, this inspector could show certain things, but it may not show like every audio thing. So if we wanted to look at what was every single component that's in a mixer, especially for like a virtual instrument track versus all of, what's in chord tracks, etc., this inspector would now allow us to see every audio aspect of a particular thing. So if I want to quickly adjust the EQ, move the mouse away. If I wanted to go to my channel strip, we could come right over here, turn these on. And then if I wanted to see what's going on, just click, and then we could just select those particular things. So this is everything that's going to be kind of tied to the audio. And to enable that in 13, go to the upper right-hand corner, and then we could just have that visible right there. So it's kind of an added inspector slot. All right, so we see, can Arpeggiator be simulated in other DAWs? So obviously Cubase can do it. So if I wanted to come here and turn this on, so let's come over here to, we'll go to like a Retrologue track. Just so now if you want to do, arpeggiators inside, all you'd have to do is, go to your MIDI inserts. So I'll select the particular track. We'll come over here to like the ARP and do that. So I don't follow every other DAW, so I'm sure other DAWs can do arpeggios, but I can't really speak for the other programs. Probably not that qualified with other programs. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording. Hope you're doing well. All right, you see Lawrence has gotten 1 gallon of tuxedo ice cream. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. Glad you can make a day. All right, so we see question, which DAW should I start with as a newbie? So, if you're starting off and you wanted to just kind of get going, Cubase Elements is a wonderful solution at $99. And what's great about that is all of your projects are going to be compatible with Cubase Pro. If you buy Cubase Elements, you could upgrade to Cubase Artist in a year if you need more capabilities and functions. Once you have all of that down, your Cubase Artist, you could update to Cubase Pro. So you could kind of get started with not an overwhelming feature set, but you can get started and get a lot of stuff done with Cubase Elements at a great price. And then instead of having to purchase other programs, you could just choose to simply upgrade to higher versions at a discount. So Cubase Elements is a wonderful solution. All right, we have Larry B checking in from a rainy Brampton, Ontario. Yeah, I think we're getting rain all weekend here. We've had this pattern for a while where it's kind of nice during the week, and on weekends when I don't have to work, then it starts to rain. So much fun for mowing lawns. All right. All right, so we see Larry B asks, could you please do a quick review of project backups versus copying the project in another directory? So if you're really careful with your project management, so like when you start a project, the ideal solution is, let's say I'm going to create a new project, and it'll ask you what folder do you want to create a project in? Ideally, you want everything to be in the same folder so that, and you want this project to be in its own unique folder so that files from a different project aren't in this folder. So if we're careful with that and we do a project, and there's one other preference if you use like the contents and loops, if you go to editing to audio and on import audio settings, here we'll see copy all files to project folder. So once we see copy all files to the project folder, as we come over here and we drop a loop in, all this information is just moved from the loop location to our project folder. So we come over here, we go to our pool, and when we look at our files, we can see that it's going to be in this particular so let me just come over here to preferences. But it's going to be copied into the particular folder. So if you do that, all your files are kind of safely in one folder and you don't have multiple songs within the same folder, then you could just copy the files, copy the project folder to a different location, and everything is good. Now, if you weren't as careful, and I've seen this from many pro users who all of a sudden, they have an entire album in one folder of audio files, and they have, kick 01, vocal 01 underscore 14,942, and they delete a file. There could be a chance that since it's sharing a common audio file folder, that's when you get into problems. So if you weren't as diligent with your file management, what you would do then, instead of copying the folder, is choose to do a backup project. Once you choose the backup project, you would choose a new unique folder. So we'll say, okay, we'll do May 17th backup. And at this point, you could give it a name. You could choose to minimize audio files. And that's if you have a 14-minute recording that you use 3 seconds of, you don't have to back up the 13 minutes and 57 seconds that you didn't do anything with. If you wanted to make direct offline processing permanent, so if you did like applied an effect, you could make sure that the original file isn't backed up with the process file. If you have files that are in a pool that are unused, you don't have to back those up if you don't want the video files or the mix down folders. So at this point, this will take all the elements in the project and move it to a new, unique, safe folder. It's not moving the files, it's creating new files in that. So if you run into problems, if you weren't diligent with file management, that's when you'd probably want to do a backup project. If you're careful with it and you know all the files in that project or in that folder, just simply move the folder over. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just. All right, reading through comments. All right. All right, so we see Ben Hunter says, hey, I've been having an issue with bypass automation on NI Replica XT plugin, but it seems the bypass automation is buggy for other third-party plugins like Pro Q3. Sometimes it seems doesn't trigger well. All right, so let's say if we come here, I have so add an audio track. And let's come over here to an insert. All right, so all right, so let's go ahead and automate this. So let's say, okay, I want to all right, and let's go ahead, just rewind and we'll play back and see. So, I'm not sure if there's any issue with the third-party plugins that's kind of causing instability with that. But let me know if when you open up the automation lane, if the automation visually is matching up with that. Also, let me know if it's like just those plugins or if you notice it with built-in plugins as well. So even if you would just copy like this automation, like if you have a problem that's doing it, if you copy that automation and come over here and say, okay, let's paste the automation here, so you could just come over and see if, you copy and paste if the same automation behaves differently on different plugins as well. So that would be interesting to know. So if we come right over here, we can say, okay, we'll paste that automation and see if it does the same thing on other plugins or just those particular plugins, and it might be just systemic to those particular plugins. All right, so we see everyone says Cubase is the best. That's why I put up his frustration. I just wish it came working out of the box. So it pretty much works really well out of the box, but there is obviously, it's like if you were to sit down in front of a piano, you're not going to play a Chopin piece the first day. You know, it's like learning a musical instrument as well. Like if you ask Hans Zimmer what instrument he would play, he would say computer. All right. All right, so we see that the inspector was just the discussion that, you know, this added inspector is going to be in 13 and not version 11. So it was new in version 13. All right, Bratman Studio says, "Hey Greg, saying hi. We met at NAMM multiple times. It's great. I miss meeting more people in person, but it's great to be at NAMM show again. Thanks for your stream question. Can I make MIDI from audio loops so I could split the drums to their own channels?" So it could be kind of broken down in a couple different ways. So let's say I'll add a Groove Agent instance, or we could do it even in a sampler track if you want. So let's come back over here. We just find more of a traditional drum loop here. Okay, so if I have this, I'm going to drag it to my sampler. So let's drag it to my sampler control, and then we could do a slice. And depending on how big your loop is. So let's say I'll take this and we'll slice, and we could adjust kind of the threshold for the slices if we wanted to. And now what we could do is, now that it's been sliced, we see this little MIDI icon. We could drag this event to our project window. And now as we kind of play this back, but as we look at the MIDI data itself, double click here. Each one of these sounds is the audio kind of broken up. As the slices that will play, so that you could isolate different things. You could do this in Groove Agent, or just use the sampler track. So when you get to sampler control, drop it in, hit slice, drag that out, and then you could break apart all different elements of the loops. So you could split them out onto their own channels if you needed to. All right, Dan McLean asks, "Hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Can you please explain the relationship of volume automation precision settings with downgrade conversion? How does that get affected on the number of samples chosen?" So let's go ahead and I'll just, so say we have this and we want, you know, so Cubase is always going to break everything down to the particular sample resolution. So if you're doing, you know, if we're working at 96K, you could have, you know, twice the precision for volume edits. Now, when we come over here, we go to our studio setup, and then we could choose go to our audio system. We could see our volume automation precision. So previous versions, this was set to, I think, 8 samples. But now we could go down to 1 sample, so that if we're drawing in automation, that this automation that we could draw in at, so let's go down to near the sample level, and I'll just, so now as we draw in our automation can be at the sample level as opposed to every 8 samples. So this way, you know, people wanted sample accurate automation for very precise cuts and like, you know, mutes and, you know, stutter type of effects, that you're able to do it and not be limited to being within 8 samples. So you may not hear a difference, but conceptually some people would have an issue with it. But this way, and now as we would export the file, that's automatically kind of, you know, truncated down to the exported sample rate, but the intention is that it works at the sample rate for the editing of the project for you. All right, so we see, so is Pro Tools better Cubase? I see Dr. Dre using it, so probably not. It's a popular program, but it's not necessarily more capable. All right, so we see Greg, stupid question. I'm starting from scratch, still learning how to install everything. How long you think it would take to make beats of enough quality for Audio Jungle or music library? So, I mean, it's a hard question to answer. So, you know, someone who has incredible talent that's just kind of learning software, you know, so if you're learning how to make a beat and how to work with beats, you know, that isn't something that just comes naturally to a lot of people. Some people will spend a lot of time crafting and cultivating that skill, along with crafting and cultivating the skill of learning your tools. So it, you know, I haven't watched you work, so it could be tough. You know, I know when I got my first copy of Cubase, I was in college. I got it on a Sunday night, and I was able to do a project the next day. Actually, ironically, I had my college professor hired me to do MIDI productions for her while she was teaching me MIDI production in class. And I got through like kind of a whole book project for MediaBay publishing. Like the next day I got it. So I was lucky. I found Cubase very intuitive for that. So, you know, people can jump in very quickly, but I don't know what your skill level at making beats is. And a lot of times when people are doing for music libraries, they've made, you know, hundreds of thousands of beats over time. So, but I think, you know, it's not going to be the software that is going to be the limiting factor. All right, so we see Illuminate says, "Hi Greg, how to make a custom arpeggiator file and play back the custom pattern using chords." Okay, so I'm just going to play some nonsensical part here. Let me just revert this, go back to where it was. All right, so there's 2 different MIDI arpeggiators. Okay, so let's say I come over here and just take it off loop. All right, I'll just play some nonsensical stuff and record it. Okay, so let's say that's my arpeggio that I've made. So we could do this a couple different ways. One is to go to the chord pads, and we can see, okay, let's go to pattern, and I could just drag this to my chord pads. And let me just shorten the pattern here, so restart kind of. Okay, so I'm going to drag this event here, and we'll turn on the chord pads. Okay, let me just. Right, let me set my input here. I'll just try the chord pads. All right, my chord pads. So that's one way. Usually the chord pads you can just kind of drag and drop, but there's also, I'll try a different approach. Let's come over here to our MIDI inserts. If we go to our Apache SX, we can drag that pattern right here. So as we would play, I could just play a chord. And as I would just play simple chords, so you could drag and drop it into the chord pads or drag and drop it into the Apache SX and have your own custom chord arpeggios. All right, so we see William Baker asks, Happy Friday, Greg. I'm trying to export multiple versions of stems, wet, dry, groups, etc. Can I add to the queue and go to different folders for each? Also, how do I have stems reflect track names? Okay, so let's come over here. I think I have a project that might help with this. Okay, so let's say we have all right, so we have everything kind of laid out for us here. We have drums with reverb. We're gonna have the same kind of reverb on guitar. And we could have like instrument pads here. We'll have our bass. All right, so let's come over here. So we see our track names. We have like kick, snare, hat, overhead. We have our bass and guitar folder with bass, rhythm guitar. We have synth pads, other instruments, and our reverb. So we have basically one reverb that's being used across all these. So let's go to our export audio mixdown, and I'm going to choose multiple. We could just come right over here. We're going to select all of our different sources. All right, so we could export our groups, and what we want to do now is, all right, so we want to make sure we want to do this wet. So let's say dry first. So we're going to come over here and let's set our path. I'm going to choose, let's come here, let's go to desktop, and we'll say new folder, and we'll call this export May 17th. Okay, and in this folder, I want to create another new folder, and we'll call this dry. Okay, so I have that, and we're going to come over here to export queue and add it to the queue. Okay, now I want to take basically the same things, and I want it to run it through the groups and sends. So we'll come over here. I'm going to choose a different path for that. So we'll say let's choose. Let's come into, we'll go to our export, and we're going to say with sends. We're going to create a new folder with sends. Okay, we're going to save that, and then what we want to do is for naming, we'll see kind of like your naming conventions. So here we could just choose to have channel name. Okay, so now I'm going to add this to the queue, so it's going to go to the with sends folder. So add to queue. Okay, and so let's say we want to add our, all right, so now that we have those kind of set up, I'm going to say start queue export. And it's going to go through. Probably shouldn't have created new projects, but so you can see there's all of my stems in the dry folder, all of my files in the with sends folder. So each export queue can go out to independent folders, different locations, different file formats, different sample rates, and then everything can be just handled right there like that. So as we can see, everything is done with that. This is going to open our new project here. So that's all you'd have to do. So now when you go to look at the folder, again, we'll just come over here to Finder. We'll say new Finder window. That we go to our desktop, our export, May 17th. All of our files are automatically just rendered for us right there. So that's how you do, and you can see it's going to carry over the same track names that we had before. So it's going to carry the track names from the original files, our drum group, our FM pad, hi-hat, keys, kick wave. Those are all the same names that we have from our particular tracks right here. So let me know if that's helpful for you. See, Uno Memento saying Cubase 4 was 2006. It's like, oh, I remember that came out. Okay. Okay, so we see Dan McLean asks, does upgrading to Nendo affect the workflow experience compared to Cubase workflow, settings and key commands wise? Just wondering. So I think if you open up Nendo, you'd find that it would be very similar to Cubase. All the key commands are all going to be the same. So a lot of people could open up Nendo once and not know that they're in, and be a Cubase user and feel like right at home. So there's no real significant differences. Nendo would just offer more capabilities and more kind of specialized tools. All right, so ProWash DFW Randy asks, hey Greg, can I set up a template to use in all my sessions with track names and plugins already loaded? Yeah, so once you have everything kind of set up, so let's say if I take everything here and I like this particular folder, we'll just come here, so delete, and so once you have everything set up, all you'd have to do is save as template. So we'll give it a name, we'll say ProWash DFW May 17th. Okay, so now when I go to start a new project, I would say new project, and your templates would come under more. So here we would just see ProWash DFW May 17th, start our new project. It asks us where we want to store our file. We hit OK. We choose our folder for the project, and we choose activate. And everything that we just had set up is kind of automatically configured for your new template. So once you have templates set up, that could really kind of speed up your workflow, especially for composers. All right, so we see Bratman Studios says Jazz Dude mentioned 40 years of Cubase. I start with the 1040 ST, would teach classes at Mid-Cities Computers, California. I guess California, maybe Canada, in late 80s and early 90s. Yeah, so I started on my Mega 4 ST with 4 megabytes of RAM, which is dare to dream at the time. Okay, so we see question. When I did make a beat in Groove Agent SE, it just kept on looping in the song, even though I didn't drag it there. Am I doing it wrong? So it could be, you could think of Groove Agent SE could have its own sequencer. All right, so let's jump back to this project here. All right, so let's say I'm in, we have Groove Agent SE here. So, Groove Agent can work in two different ways. There's kind of an MPC style paradigm and a virtual drummer paradigm. So when I pop over here, we'll just say I'm going to open up the instrument. So if I just have like the pattern here, I could have the pattern play with my project. So when I come over here, we can say follow transport. So now when I hit play or stop, the pattern can automatically play. So we could think of Groove Agent as having kind of its own internal sequencer. So you could have pattern pads and instruments. So these pattern pads, again, are just going to be, so this could give you an idea to kind of start with, but if we choose just to have that pattern and we choose follow transport, and if I change the tempo to 120 to 96, it'll just kind of automatically follow to 80. So make sure that you don't have, Groove Agent set to follow transport and that the patterns aren't playing. So anytime you load a kit, you could also load the kit with patterns, and that could just simplify, but make sure that you don't have this always playing. And sometimes you could have this play, and no matter what you do, it may, if you stop, it could still be playing just because you're telling the internal pattern sequencer here to continue to play. So we see, so you guys are doing Cubase longer than I'm alive. So Cubase has been out since 1989, so it's 35 years old, and Steinberg is a company, started in 84, so Steinberg is celebrating their 40th anniversary this year. Okay, we see I'm just want to talk. Hey Greg, I'm in love with Hallian Sonic, but sometimes libraries I buy are too big on my screen, difficult to use. Do you know a way to change Hallian Sonic size? So generally what you may want to do is, I'm not sure if you're running Mac or PC, but is just to adjust the screen resolution. If you're running on PC, one of the things you could do is if you go to your preferences, we could just come over here. If you go to general, and this isn't on the Mac OS version, which is why I'm running, and then you could set system scaling, so like the resolution that I'm running is 1920 by 1080, which is like a 1080p resolution. I find that to be a very comfortable screen resolution for running Cubase. I could run a higher resolution on my monitor, but for like demonstration purposes, I think that this is a screen resolution that you could watch on your phone or your computer monitor or TV, and everything isn't so small. But so try changing the screen resolution or the scaling. If you're on Windows, if you're on Mac, try just changing the screen resolution. So some of the like 13-inch MacBook Pros or MacBook Airs kind of have a bad low screen resolution. So they kind of double or quadruple the pixels, but the amount of information that you could see on the screen, try just to go, if you're on Mac OS, go to your system preferences, and when you go to screen or display, let me find it, displays, you could adjust kind of your screen resolution. So try a resolution like 1920 by 1080, and I think that it'll be a very comfortable view for you. All right, so you see, howdy Greg, do you have time for a bass track on one of the songs on my solo CD? Randy is poking me to get it finished. So yeah, send it over. Sorry, I've been really swamped with work stuff. I'm hoping to get the Hot Mess tunes done this weekend. So yeah, please send it along. I'd love to play on it. All right, we have a question from Cubase X. What does save new version do exactly? All right, so let's say I have a project open. All right, so we'll create a new project here. All right, so come over here. We say, okay, I want to save this project, and we'll call it May 17, 2024. All right, I'll give it a unique name. Okay, so we see that this is May 17, 2024 MP. So when I just come over here and say save new version, what it did is it automatically just incremented and added a 0, 1. So if I was, let's say, okay, I like what I did, but I'm not sure if I want to save it, and maybe this would change something in the previous version. Maybe I'd want to go back and do that, but if I save these changes over the existing project, what that will do is I couldn't necessarily go back and do that. So in a scenario like that, I would do a save new version, and I still have when we go to my Windows, I still have the May 27, May 17, 2024 NP, and then it would just automatically save it as an np.01. So it would just add a number and increment that so that it is a unique project file, so I could always go back to the other file. And so let me know if that makes sense. So we see just comment, you share so much knowledge, I should buy a notebook and write the tricks down. Unfortunately, they're all on YouTube for you to watch. So, and if you go to cubaseindex.com, you could just kind of search for particular topics as well. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, wow. So wish I knew what that was for. It was 27 minutes ago, so maybe I did something cool. All right, so we see Roland stuff. Hi, Greg. I'm struggling to get different instrument articulations and Iconica Sketch to be at comparable levels. So violin 1 is staccato is fortissimo, but the legato for the same instrument is pianissimo. And can't seem to balance it whenever I change the instrument's articulation for the instrument in the lower editor zone. It must be me. Many thanks. Okay, so let's do just new project. Sorry, let me just do new empty project. Okay, so let's come over here to violin. All right, so let's say I'm on, let's make sure I get the right articulation. So let's say staccato. When I come over here, all right, so let's say, so we're at staccato here. So say violin 1 staccato is fortissimo, but legato for the same instrument is pianissimo. So all right, so let's come over here to legato. All right, so what you have to do is just use some of the articulations, like when you're doing staccato. So some of these will react to velocity, but when you're doing legato, it's going to react to more like using your modulation wheel for the dynamics. So this way you could say, okay, I want to come over here. So just use when you switch and it sounds very soft, just that's when you'd want to use for the dynamic controls, depending upon the articulation. Like, sometimes with pizzicato, if we come over here, let's, if we just choose pizz, we would just, at that point we could just say, okay, when we do just pizz, we don't necessarily would change the dynamics in the middle of a note like we would on a legato patch. So when you run into situations like that, just know that the articulations, because of the articulation itself, and when you play legato, you change the speed of the bow, you dig the bow in a little harder. Then playing the same note, something that every piano player wants to do is to take a note and make it louder, softer, louder, softer for that level of control. So to do that, when the articulation is applicable, that's when you'd use something like the modulation wheel by default on your controller, so that the modulation wheel can control the dynamics. So give that a try, Roland stuff. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on from Grand Chapel Studios outside of London. He's major busy tonight, just popping in to say hi and to slap the like button. And we look forward to his soup soon. All right, we see we got 100 likes. Thank you very much. Okay, reading through comments. All right. See Pro Watch DFW just says, thanks, Greg, probably with the templates. All right, so we see Danigel. Maybe if you could just spell out phonetically how to pronounce her name. Sorry about that. I just don't want to butcher it every time. Can you show how to install a patch on Groove Agent SE5? Click on Latin preset and it says something is not found. None of the pads play any sound. So what you could do in Groove Agent 5 is just come over here. So let's say we'll do Groove Agent SE5. That's what comes with Cubase. And right click on the agent here and say load kit with patterns. So if you come over here, we could just say, and I have some extra kits that are installed. So let's say you just want to come over to Studio Kit and I want to load this one. And now I could come over here, you could click on the pads. And then you'll have patterns here. So you could just kind of trigger patterns like so. So again, right click on the agent, and then you could just say load kit with patterns. So give that a try. All right, so we have a question. Any reasons why using 32-bit float for exporting audio? I use 4824 for film scoring. I'm just curious. Thanks. So what's handy about it is just in case you accidentally clip, 32-bit floating point is like really handy for that. So let's come over here. Let's drop a quick drum loop. We'll drop a loop in. Which is fun. Okay, so let's say, and this is probably not the best example for orchestral stuff, but we'll get the point across here. Okay, so I'm going to take this, and let's say I have a very dynamic, which orchestral music can tend to be. So I'm going to take this, and I'll just do a quick Shift X, and I'm going to just increase the gain on this significantly. So let's say we play this back. All right, so there's probably a good chance that I'm clipping this. So let's say our orchestral piece has, tend to have lots of dynamics. So I'm going to do a quick export audio of this. So we'll come over and export audio. Now I'll do one is 32-bit floating point and one is 24-bit. So let's come over here to our audio mix down and we'll just say 24. bit mix, and I'm going to choose this to export as 24-bit resolution. We'll do our stereo out and we'll import it into the audio track. All right. So let me just come here and we'll say export audio. Okay, and I will not have the track record enabled this time when we do that. Sorry. So export audio. All right, so we see clipping. Now let's take that same file. I'll mute the exported file, and I'm going to do that as a 32-bit floating point. So we'll export audio mixdown. Same thing, we're going to call this one 32. And we're going to export it as 32-bit floating point. So you always hear 32-bit floating point, more headroom, more headroom. Okay, so we're going to export this, and we'll show you exactly what that headroom does. Okay, so now let's just hide this. Let's take a look at I'm going to zoom in here, and let's say we look at the files here, like this particular file, and we could see that the audio, as we zoom in, that the audio at the top, those amplitudes just kind of get to a certain point and just flatline. Okay, so if I bring down the gain on this, we could see that the top of the files are completely kind of truncated at a certain point. So we reached our threshold level, and at that point it just doesn't go higher. Now let's take a look at the same idea with 32-bit floating point. Okay, so we'll make this super tall here. All right, now what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to take the clip gain down, and as we bring the clip gain down, we could see that all of the transients are completely intact. So now when I play this back, this audio isn't going to clip. This audio, when I adjust the clip gain, is still clipping, but it's playing back softer because this has a lower resolution than this file. So that's why you'd want to export at 32-bit floating point, because you have a lot more dynamic range. And if you were doing a big project and one sample clipped and it was refused because, it's like, oh, you failed quality control, because a lot of places for streaming, for broadcast, will just do a quick test. But with 32-bit floating point, you could always have the original file intact. And when we look at this file here, again, we could see that these will always be kind of truncated at the top of the waveform, whereas these, the original transients, are still there. And the only difference between these two files is this is 24-bit and this is 32-bit floating point. So same exact files, but this one will be, virtually impossible to clip. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see that Daniel's name is pronounced Daniel with no J. So thanks for the clarification. All right, so Roland Stuff says, thanks for explaining the articulation dynamics in Iconica Sketch, Greg, so you're welcome. Okay, so we see from Dan McLean, how to calibrate the dry and wet on compression to be equal mix. So it could depend on the compression plugin, but let's say if I just wanted to come here, let's say we go back to our original and we're playing this. And this might already be pretty heavily squashed, but so a lot of times when we come over to your dynamics, what you could do is if you wanted this to be at 50%, this is how you could make sure that the ratio between between wet and dry. Let me just read. So how to calibrate the dry and wet on compression to be equal mix. So if your plugin, and a lot of the Cubase dynamics will have a dry wet, and this will allow you basically to set almost a parallel processing within the plugin without having to set up different buses. You could just set the dry and wet to 50%, and then it's going to be halfway processed, halfway not processed. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding, Dan. All right. So we see Eve's just saying, thanks so much, Greg, about the 24-bit, 32-bit. So hope that's helpful for you. All right, I know we had a couple of questions that were mailed in, so let's get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right, let me open up a project. So the first question we had was how to have a single track routed to multiple drum tracks. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's say I have my drums here. So let's say on this, I'm going to have multiple drum sources. Okay, so we'll come over and say, okay, I have backbone. For a kick drum, I have a snare that I want to use from Groove Agent, maybe toms from a different Groove Agent kit. Let's load up cymbals from directly from Halion Symphonic Orchestra. I want to add percussion from Groove Agent, Percussion Agent. Okay, and I wanted to have a track, a clap that's on the sampler track. So we go to our sampler control. I want it that hand clap. So I want it to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sounds, but I want it to have them all play from one track. So I load up all these particular instruments, and what we could do is we're going to add a MIDI track. So let's add a MIDI track here. We can put on channel 1. I'll just say let's add the track, and what we want to do is to come over, and where we see drum map, we're going to choose drum map setup. We're going to click on the plus sign, and then we'll call this May 17th. So once I kind of create a new drum map, at this point we will say we're going to load the May 17th drum map. I'm going to create an event, and now when I create that event, we'll go to full screen mode, and if I scroll over, we can now say, okay, I want to go to C1, and I want the kick, but I want this coming from backbone. So when and the snare on D1, I want coming from Groove Agent SE, the Groove Agent snare. So, and we'll put this onto MIDI channel 1. And I want the toms, let's say A1, I want this coming from Groove Agent, A1, G1, and F1. Let's send this to Groove Agent. So now, that would just sound awful. Okay, and now let's say I want the hand clap. We'll copy these notes here, and let's come over to our hand clap and put on B1, and we want this going to the sampler track. So at this point, we could just kind of come over again and just say, and I kind of created just a quick dumb pattern here, but so now we can see that like this one pattern, and I'll just kind of blow it up here, and let's reduce the size. We're only seeing the particular drum sound. So when I play this pattern, all of these different drum modules are playing because each sound in the drum editor can be remapped to any MIDI port, to any MIDI channel that's needed. So you could have 128 different drum sources within the MIDI drum editor so that we could play, you know, backbone. We could play this groove agent for our snare. We could play different groove agent for toms. We could have our cymbals coming from an orchestral library, our percussion coming from a groove agent, percussion agent, and our sampler track, all kind of playing different sounds together, but all coming from one single track. So again, to start that off, you want to add a MIDI track. Go to your where you see drum map, go to drum map setup, click on plus to make a new drum map, load that drum map, and then you could just choose different output ports and different MIDI channels for each of the different instruments that you have loaded up. So this way, one track can play back 128 different sounds. All right, so we see just question, hi, in FabFilter program, my presets are not visible. I went send in to FabFilter support request, and they replied, this looks like a Cubase issue. If you're using Cubase's preset menu, please get in touch with Steinberg. Confused. All right, so what happens with a lot of third-party plugins? If you run into this, we'll just come over here and we'll see, let's see if it's with the curve EQ. We may notice this. So I come over here, you may have like, you know, plugin presets that are VST3 presets here. So we could come over and have different VST3 presets, but you know, plugin companies are making plugins for multiple plugin formats. So a lot of times third-party plugins may not use VST plugin presets. They may want to have their own kind of proprietary system so that they could have the same user experience if someone is using, you know, different DAW programs, and that's understandable. But you may not see all the third-party presets listed here if they haven't created VST3 presets. It's nice when they do. Many don't, but you may have to use kind of like an internal preset browser within a particular within a particular plugin so that they could have a common experience within their particular plugins, regardless if you're running it on Mac or PC or running as AU, AAX, or VST3. So that's why you may not see it. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Thanks and again, you could always mail questions into clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see Gerald Ely says, didn't know that about the 32-bit float. All right, so we just see Daniel send, says, Cubase is not intuitive for me, but I'm focusing on 100% following a course on Udemy. I was hoping in 2 years I can make some professional level music. Is that realistic? 5 hours a day? So yeah, definitely. But, you know, just whatever you do, just make music. And it's, you know, just like learning an instrument. You're not going to be a master at it. You know, if first time you sat down at a piano, you weren't playing, you know, very complex classical list pieces, or you're not playing, Van Halen guitar solos the first time you get a guitar. So think of it as just kind of like learning a particular instrument, and then but there's lots of free resources. Watch lots of when you have a question on a particular topic, do a search on cubaseindex.com. And, we have 4 years of these Hangouts to look through. And we have just, it's a wonderful community here as well. So you're always welcome to ask any question. All right, so we have a question from Freedom. Why do waveforms inside audio files disappear in a project window when zooming in and out? All right, so let's take a look. So we can see when we zoom in and out, there is a preference that could cause the waveforms to disappear. So let's come over here to your preferences. I think it's maybe... under zoom, you'll see quick zoom. So if this is checked, that's probably checked. Come over here, and now when I have that checked, the waveforms disappear until I let go as we zoom in and out. So no waveforms, I let go of the cursor, then the waveforms reappear. And this is like for like really old, bad, slow computers. So go to your preferences, and then just go to editing, to zoom, and uncheck quick zoom. And I think that will fix the problem for you. All right, you see Gerald Elias take off, who's wishing everyone a great weekend. Thanks for joining us, Gerald. Hope you're well. See Daniel just saying, this guy moves through Cubase like it's nothing. I wish I could catch up on all the streams. So yeah, I think you could watch, there's, thousands of hours of live streams that you could watch. And, as you do this, and even some of the best people in the world, like, I haven't done it in a while, but like I would get together with Hans Zimmer and his team, and are like, okay, we use Cubase this way, and we want to watch how you work and approach a situation, because it's really easy to work Cubase how you want to and how it works for your particular workflows. And there could be like just a little thing that comes in an update that's could save so much time that you may have just missed. So, even the most experienced users are going to learn something new. I learned something new in every live stream as well. So it's, just realize that it's a never-ending quest for the knowledge. All right, so we see that Gareth's daughter Lola is fed. So wonder if it was Five Guys tonight or pizza. It's usually some of the common choices on Friday nights. All right, so we see Tim K just says, thanks everyone for tips and tricks and community. Michael team's learning every time. All right, we'll see. I think we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that kind of sneak in. I know we've gone through a lot of wonderful questions today. I hope that everyone has learned a new... all right, we see Gareth did homemade burgers tonight. That sounds good. All right, you see Dan McLean says, thank you for your service to the Cubase community. I'm just happy to be able to share knowledge. I think when you get to a certain level of knowledge, that it's really imperative to share the information with others. So it's very, satisfying and rewarding to me to help people get along so that they could do stuff with their Cubase. So we see Daniel just says, I was looking forward to stream the entire week. Something you click through in 30 seconds would take me months. It takes conscious reminding that something so short is so valuable. And we see Garrett, just nice comment of thanks for your infinite wisdom. So Daniel asks, how long have you been doing Cubase? So I've worked with the company for over 32 years, and probably 32 and a half years I've been running Cubase. So I got it in 1991. So, and I just fell in love with it. So, all right. So I get Michael Teens has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Black Diamond ice cream. Thank you very much. Looking forward to that. I think my son is almost done with the ice cream we bought him. All right. So you see Daniel just saying, "Oh my God." See, Michael Teens just says Greg Bales is out on a daily basis, and Dan says to start watching. He's probably 2/3 year now, not sure. So it's great. All right, so we see Daniel is going to move his car, so we don't want you to get a ticket because you watched the Club Cubase live stream, so that's important. Garrett says, love it, first mix. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just a little early. I appreciate everyone spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Steinberg products. And I feel so incredibly grateful that I could be part of such a wonderful community, and I appreciate everyone for for all the work that people do and being a part of the community. So we see, hey Greg, can you explain how to use the insert IXML chunk? All right, so I think that might be more with so say if I want to take this and let's export audio mix down. All right, so I think that if all right, let me see if I can remember this real quick. Hang on. I think it might be with like metadata for like MP3 categories. Just do a quick lookup of it just to make sure I'm not sending wrong information. Yeah, so what this is going to allow you to do is when you add, so when we come here, this would allow you to kind of put in the author name or time code definition. So, it's this metadata here. That's what kind of the IXML chunk is doing. All right. All right. So we see Bratman Studio says, remember when you could put multiple songs on a 1.44 megabyte disk? Yeah, I remember having many albums where the whole album was on one floppy disk. So, but it was all MIDI. All right, Roland Stuff says, I've just bought Spectralayers Pro 10 on offer. It's brilliant, but seems to be fairly hungry on PC resources when this plugin is left open. Is that to be expected? So it's doing a lot of kind of AI functionality for a lot of the processing, so it can be intensive for what for the processing that it's doing, because it's very sophisticated and basically taking apart audio at so many different levels. All right, so we see Zai Fernando says, thanks so much, Gregory. Appreciate the privilege to learn with you. That's very kind. I appreciate you being on the live stream so I could share knowledge. We see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. All right. See, maybe Michael Teams could give Graham an ice cream. If not, we'll give you a gallon of strawberry ice cream. In case Michael Teams misses it. Oh, okay. Michael Teams has him covered. All right, so I think we are out of questions. Again, thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. We'll be here Tuesday. I will be out. I think I have to go to Boston on the 28th, so we may miss the May 28th Club Cubase meeting. I'll let you know more next week as that gets finalized. But I may have to pop up to Boston for the day. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says, we help this guy out with the NFA C13 upgrade. Yeah, send me a quick email as well, and I'll work on it for you. All right, so we see Gareth Kitch just says, whipped out a whippy. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for everyone for all the great questions. And we look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday. Everyone, please have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe and healthy, and look forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you. And with that, have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.